Welcome to Fantasy or Reality, the Gambling Problem Podcast. This is the second episode of the All Recovery series. Our second guest on this podcast is Chris L. He is a CASAC-G clinician at New Choices in Schenectady, New York. And I'm really happy to have him here. Thank you very much for joining us and doing this, Chris.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
So, as everybody knows, or if you don't know, this is a different series we got going on in this podcast where we're featuring people that have sustained recovery, who've been in recovery for a period of time, and really diving into what works for them to kind of put that message out there. Because you can go on to YouTube and, as you know, podcast, whatever, listen to podcasts anywhere. You can find all of the sensationalized stories about the nitty gritty of what everybody did and who shot this and who almost died then. And like
Hmm.
there's 1,000 of those stories out there, but they don't dive too much into the recovery. And I feel like that's what's lacking. Um, and that's kind of what I've been wanting to put out there with this podcast. So we'll have Chris start out. He's going to give us a little brief introduction from about him, of himself, and tell us a little bit why he's in recovery, and then we'll jump into the questions. So.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, like honest self-assessment and then, years of benefiting from a lot of like trauma therapy and things like that, looking back, addictive tendencies, personality, behaviors began as far back as like my childhood imagination. Anything I could do to escape what was going on. Like I do come from a history of like some DV background, some trauma, some stuff like that. And, I just remember just living, just living in my head, living in this fantasy world, anything I could do to escape myself. And then, from just pure, simple, imagination with like toys to like the first time I just discovered like a book, it's like, boom, I was there with that character. I remember like I used to get, like at a very young age, I'd get really emotional when I'd finish books. Like I'd cry because it was like losing a friend in a
Yeah.
weird way. Like I'd like a well-written book, and then also like a child's understanding of like permanence and not. You get attached to these characters, and then they're gone, and like their journey in your life is over. And I remember being young and having like a weird understanding of that, even at like 4 and 5. I learned how to read pretty early and was reading like novels at a pretty early age, and just remember just like crying. And then from that, you know, what it's still the same process, still escaping, but it's like finding a better, more efficient way to do it. Then Tony Hawk Pro Skater comes out. Now not only does
Yeah.
it have like a killer soundtrack,
Hmm.
but it's like getting I was deeply deeply addicted to video games even up until like my mid 20s. Like, and even in my mid 20s I'm like a semi-professional like World of Warcraft player, sponsored by like Razer, like the mouse and keyboard series,
Hmm.
and like a top 100 in the world guild. I'm working 40 hours a week and rating 40 to 60 hours a week, like two full-time jobs. Like, that's in my 20s, but like still the same mechanism, still escaping, still, and music as well. I started playing music and exploring music at a very young age, but like taking professional lessons around like 13, 14, and all these things to just escape the things that were going on, not deal with things. And every time it was like I found something that like tickled my brain a little bit more. And knowing what we know now, especially about like gambling and video game and how they overlap, like it makes sense why that would be like so sensationalized as a kid, and why it was like, they're literally designed to be addictive. So you know, just buying into that, engaging in that, and then, discovering like drugs and alcohol. And after that, it was just kind of off to the races. And actually, so my drug of choice ended up being opiates, but before that, in like late teens, early college years, like a lot of hallucinogens, like really trying to escape reality, like using it in a very unhealthy way,
Hmm.
like constantly, constantly. And then I ended up having knee surgery in my very early 20s, and then, being widely overprescribed opiates. I think it was like, well, I won't say what it was, but it was definitely overprescribed. And then, in short order, I burned through that um, script. And then what was, one of those things of like, the double-edged sword of having like social acceptability. I had like a very good job and could like afford to continue to purchase pills. And then, did that for a while until someone was like, hey, there's this powdery stuff that's way cheaper. It does the same
Hmm.
thing. And I'm like, do tell, good man. And
Yeah.
then,
Uh-huh.
and after that, it's just, you know, like you said, like we don't need to go through the horror stories. The unique details may be different, but it's all the same. Same degradation, same lack of self-respect, same hollowness. And my recovery's journey really begins as a journey of like improving my mental health and finding myself in a psych ward. Um, my first time in a psych ward as an adult in my mid 20s, and having someone come up to me, there's a bunch of unwell people in a psych ward together, and they're sharing war stories and things of that nature, as young folks that think they're adults do. And
Hmm.
if someone was like happened to later identify as a member of Narcotics Anonymous, and they said, "Hey, man, I think maybe you ever think maybe it's the drugs?" And I was like, "That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, I don't have a problem. Like, my mom's a filthy drunk. I'd never, be an addict or an alcoholic. Like, I'd never drink alcohol. Or, meanwhile, I'm like banging all this dope. Everybody like
Hmm.
being snooty about it because it's not what my mother does or what
Yeah.
have you. This, justification, validation, stuff like that. And, I end up being on like uh, leave from work. I was on FMLA when I got out of there. And this individual was like, "Hey, I don't have a car. Would you drive me to a meeting?" And I was like, "Sure." And in the first few meetings, I dropped them off and waited outside, or dropped them off and came back. And eventually came in. And after a few weeks after that, I heard someone tell pretty much my story, and just was like, that ended with me and that man like holding arms as I wept, and it was like this huge cathartic. And it was one of these instances where, like, the reason why like effective therapists and clinicians are effective, and why psychotherapy and well, talk therapy can be effective, is that it's about validating. Like, people feel seen and validated. And that's kind of what that provided me. Like, when I first started going to the meetings, like I said, it kind of meant nothing to me. And then I heard I heard what I needed to hear. And have feeling seen and validated for the first time. Like, oh, like I remember spending a lot of my life feeling very invisible, like a wandering ghost. Uh, and, you know, that my life was pretty inconsequential. It didn't impact anyone, whether I lived or didn't live. I didn't influence anything. Um, a lot of severe depression. And it's interesting now, and I engaged in a fair amount of self-harm, non-suicidal, self-injurious behaviors. And it's interesting now to know, like as an adult and someone that works now in the field of addiction, that self-harm and opiates specifically use identical neural pathways in the brain. So ironically, it makes perfect sense that like having a history of self-harm, that it would be the opiates that would be the thing that would, you know, scratch the itch the best.
Yeah.
So not realizing that engaging in self-harm, I was like inadvertently laying ground
Yeah.
for a later issue. But yeah, that's kind of how I first, you know, came to experience recovery in my mid 20s.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so how long have you been in sustained recovery?
So I have been in recovery for my drug of choice for over 16 years, but then
Wow.
you go and
Congratulations.
do other things. Thank you. And about 7 years this fall.
That's
So
awesome, man.
thank you, man. 7 years completely absent of everything this fall. Like I said, a little over 15 or just under 15 from drug of choice opiates. But beyond that, there was still, there was substitution and things that people told me that I didn't listen to and had to figure out on my own.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was very
Yeah.
similar. I mean, just like you said, you go to the meeting, everybody's got different pathways to recovery, but like
Yeah.
some I can connect with so many similarities in your story with, different ways of escaping when you're growing up, one thing or another. Mine thing was music also. I
Yeah.
dove into music, bands, everything, number of other different ways of escaping. Um, you know, using hallucinogenics like at a horrific rate, like, taking mushrooms during the day, going to work or going to school. It's like I understand it can be used in a therapeutic way. Potentially they talk about it these days, who knows? But I mean, like the way
Well, the science is there that it can be helpful, but it's all intentions and motives, right?
exactly, whereas guys like us were taking it just to escape, and
Yeah.
using hallucinogenics in a horrible way, and then yeah, diving into opiates and starting with the pills and then moving on to the powders and 100%. And then,
Yeah.
I've been same thing. I've been free of opiates for um 17 years at this point.
Yeah. Congrats.
But thank you. But as you know, I've got just over 5 years bet free. So in those 12 years, I didn't, I never touched another drug. I had a drink on my honeymoon. It was 2012, but didn't drink after that. And then, didn't start gambling until, later on in my life, 2017-ish, was when I,
Hmm.
2017 is when I placed my first bet because I didn't actually enter into recovery. So, um, you know, same thing here. I've been clean for like a long period of time, but I don't feel like I entered recovery until I finally entered recovery for this last, addiction and really started addressing all the addictions. And
Hmm.
why it was just like moving from one to the other, even though I wasn't using substances or gambling in those time periods in between, I was like, you know, self-medicating with food or self-hatred or just a
Oh,
million other things, just like medicating in different ways or escaping in different ways.
absolutely.
So what have been the tools you've used in recovery to maintain it successfully? I can't say that
Hmm.
word. And what have you found that works best for you and why?
I mean, first and foremost, like you already know from knowing me a little bit before now, like humor has been one of my
Yeah.
greatest assets. Actually, it's funny because it's something that I've rolled into like a very strong foundational clinical tool that I use with people, like a morals and principles constellation. Like I have a list, and obviously there's more than 100 morals and values and principles, but I have this list of 100, and I kind of went through and isolated the ones that were really important to me, and then defined it. Well, okay, well, why is humor important? Why is integrity important to me? What does it mean? How does it show up in my life? And then establishing that these are my values and my principles and my morals, then does the audio and the video match? If these are the things I believe and hold true, then is this behavior like is continuing to do dope, is continuing to substitute, is continuing to engage in, a part of my history that I didn't necessarily discuss, but is like, in my mid 20s, around the time I finally did go start to get help, like a lot of like sex addiction, a lot of like being involved as like a young man in awkward, like, just to say it, like awkward sexual gangbang communities, like things like that, where there's like a lot of weird, nefarious stuff going on. And all of this just for like hollow validation. And then because I didn't feel good about me, I later learned. But then looking at like, is my relationship with like sex, is my relationship with like how I engaged with partners intimately and otherwise, like, does this video ad match the audio of like, I have integrity and uh, commitment and dedication? And then like a very honest look at like some things did not match at all. And then, okay, what does that mean? Does it mean that it's not my value, or does this mean that I'm behaving because I'm unwell in a way that departs from my value? And how do I get back on track? So a lot of work around principles and morals, and kind of learning to accept that I actually have them. I've always been very impatient with myself. And recently I heard that patience requires, I'm closing my eyes because I want to quote it directly. Patience requires meeting and sitting with the truth. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And it doesn't have to be a big truth. Like if I show up 20 minutes early to an appointment and I'm impatient, the truth I'm not meeting is that I'm 25 minutes early and I just have to wait,
Hmm.
right? It can be a very minuscule thing. And I've kind of turned it around to sometimes I'm impatient with myself because I don't accept the truth that I actually do have worth and that I actually do have value. Because the old schema, the old negative core beliefs, the old trauma, and that pattern of like confirmation bias tells me that I'm not worth it, tells me that I don't deserve. So I'm impatient with myself because I'm not meeting the truth that I actually do deserve good things and that I am a good person.
Hmm.
It was really interesting that recently when when we were speaking, you mentioned like guilt and shame. And like I can be a good person that's done bad things. And that was a truth that I came to realize. And yeah, going to meetings, interacting with different people, like learning how to identify and not compare. Because like, the first couple times I went to meetings, people are like the equivalent of like, I walk school to barefoot, and barefoot uphill both ways. And I'm like, well, I haven't sold and I haven't done this. And I have, a long list of not yets.
Yeah.
And then, as a result, not identifying and comparing, not a, but not realizing that the feelings were the same, the hollowness was the same, the pain was the same. Like hurt is still hurt. How I'm just, displaying it may be different, or how I'm harming myself may be different. And then finding finding a sense of spirituality and with that purpose, um, getting more, with my spiritual and moral core, like I said, the moral compass, like the principles and morals and values, doing that kind of rudimentary work because early recovery is a really big process of discovery and rediscovery of self. Like I like to conceptualize it like the jigsaw puzzle pieces of self. Like I like to highlight my humor and I like to highlight my tattoos. I don't like to highlight that I'm 5'5" and I don't like to highlight other things. And just learning to just fully embrace like it's funny, there's a comedian that said loving somebody requires loving the crust of a mother effer. I don't know if I can swear on this. And and it was funny, but then I realized, oh yeah, because people are multifaceted. Like it's not just the ooey gooey center. Like people have crust. There's an underbelly to people sometimes. Like there's no perfect being. But when you then conceptualize it as self-love, that also means that like you have to maybe not love, but learn to acknowledge some of the parts of yourself that you don't like. Carl Jung and he coined shadow work initially and, a lot of Jungian psychiatrists say a lot of pithy things, and I won't go super into that. But the whole notion is like it's embracing the parts of yourself I don't love in order to heal them.
Yeah.
If I just keep stuffing them down, if I keep ignoring the parts of myself that I don't like, guess what? It's going to continue to be in a vulnerability for, engagement in behavior, engagement if things that are not in alignment with my spiritual core and center, then that can perpetuate guilt and or shame. And then maybe now there's confirmation bias. And the smallest thing theoretically could result in like, I haven't decided to pick up in a long time, but it could sound really good tomorrow. It could sound good in an hour. I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. If I was, I would utilize these powers for evil and have an island somewhere. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, really getting learning how to and I love it because it's a work in progress. Like I get in as refrain, right? I get to continue to grow and evolve. It's very daunting, especially early recovery, to be like forever. I can't do this forever.
Yeah.
Things like that. Or like I'm always in a state of perpetual growth. Like that sounds really daunting, depending on your perspective. But learning to embrace, like, no, I get to grow and evolve. I get to screw something up and then like come back and do it a little bit better if I choose to.
Yeah.
Or I can allow that to perpetuate cycles of self-sabotage because I'm really good at what I do. I'm really good at that.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. That's one of our
yeah,
fortes. Um,
absolutely.
I love it. So all of this, the change in mindset, the shift in thinking and reframing how you feel about yourself and the deep dive and searching, the soul searching, all this stuff. Now, what led you to all of this? Was it going to
Mhm.
meetings? Was it going into therapy? Was it an inpatient? What was it that led you to that path?
A kind of, like an amalgamation of all the above. And also, like when I was always a real egg, people can tell by the way I talk, uh, except for the fact that I do love to curse. But I was a real egghead growing up. Like I had I think 18 or 21 college credits by the time I left high school. Like very,
Damn.
I was very fixated on psychology. And as it's like a trope as old as time at this point, I was so interested in psychology because I was trying ways to fix myself. So like I'm very well read and very well learned when it comes to certain like modalities in psychology, certain schools of thought, like the history of certain things. And part of it was like an active pursuit of that, as well as like the combination of like now we're entering into like I had been to a lot of therapy growing up, but like, you've probably heard of like chronic or fatal uniqueness. It's one of those things. It's funny. I recently I would even still even still tell my I've had the same therapist for over 7 years actually, which is a beautiful thing and a blessing. But I would tell my therapist like, oh, like she would try to use a various like modality on me, and I'd be like, I'm a wizard too. Like I know how the sauce is made. And then she'd be like, well, what do you get from not trying it? And I'm like, ah, damn it. And she's right again. But it's like this weird, like, I didn't realize it till later on in life, which I then expressed to her. But like growing up, I was playing chess. Well, I thought I was playing chess. I was probably realistically playing checkers. But like, I'm thinking I'm playing chess with these like adult therapists. And I'm like, they won't work for me. I'm too different. Ironically enough, I'm both the biggest piece of shit in the world, but I'm also too smart for this evidence-based clinical model to work on me because, I'm just too different. My pain's too unique. I'm I'm a moron, but I'm too smart for this. And it like all these different things of like, you know, the interesting duality of like lack of self-confidence and worth, yet profound ego simultaneously. And just allowing that to be a barrier for years and years and years and years. And even like I said, when I first went to meetings, identifying and not comparing. Oh, well, I didn't sell myself. And then realizing like, oh yeah, but then like how many people have you slept with that you have no idea whose name? Like, yeah, you're going to these like sex parties and things like that. You like, I don't know any of these people's names. I have it's ironic, like when most guys talk about like, oh, I have a high number, there's like some type of like braggadocious machismo, but like I am genuinely ashamed of like how high the number is. And like you could flip it and be funny and be like, for a short, rotund man, I've done quite well. And I have, I guess, by that measure.
Yeah.
But just like all the shame I allowed myself to feel
Yeah.
around like just this hollow validation seeking. And again, then I'm like, well, is that better? At least they got paid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe mine was worse. So then like getting to a point of like, well, why were they doing it? Well, well, I felt the same things and I wanted someone to fulfill me, whether, whether it be a body or a drug or a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
So like really kind of embracing humility for the first time is kind of what shifted in congruence with like having a background with some knowledge and then actually actually utilizing therapy for what it's for instead of like these weird mind games. You watch Good Will Hunting and you think you're going to be Matt Damon, like talking circles around some psychiatrist or something. I don't know. And then it turns out the only thing you've been doing is putting yourself in knots.
Yeah. I mean, it's baffling what our mind can do to us. We can feel like we're the biggest pile of shit, but also feel like we're the only one that can fix it, or we're just smarter than everybody, or we can,
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's pretty crazy, this stuff that you when you look back and realize that the tango our brain was doing constantly with all that.
impressive to be
It
honest.
is. Um, so were there
Needlessly so.
any recovery methods that you tried that didn't work well for you?
So, yeah, so there's many pathways to recovery. I mean, even as a clinician, I completely believe in harm reduction.
Hmm.
But in the beginning, that I was kind of more embracing like harm reductive techniques. But then also, and that's not to say, who knows, 15 years removed from some of these things, like maybe it would be no problem. Who knows? I don't have an interest in exploring that.
Yeah.
But no, being like, okay, like I told you, I will, I'm not an addict. My mom's a drunk. I'm not a drunk, you know.
Yeah.
So I did. I stopped doing heroin, and then I drank like a fish for like 4 more years, and then
Yeah.
I was like, you know, blackout, I mean, somehow luckily never got into a serious accident, never got pulled over, anything like that. But not knowing how I got home more times than I genuinely like
Yeah.
to admit,
Hmm.
uh, things that were definitely, you know, could produce a fair amount of guilt and shame if you allow them to. And just being like, well, then how was that better? But thinking like, oh, well, I'm not doing this. But understanding that harm reduction itself is about intentions and motives.
Yeah.
I'll, what I was really doing, calling it harm reduction, was substituting.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, in the name of harm reduction, I substituted for a while, and that really didn't work for me. I'm the type of guy that needs nothing. I happen to be completely and totally abstinent. I don't even drink coffee or smoke cigarettes.
Wow. I can't
Well,
imagine having no coffee.
I, I was told at a very young age it would stunt my growth, and like I said, I'm only 5'5". I'm only 5'6" on tall days, and most days I ain't tall, buddy. So I was like, I gotta, I gotta fight for every inch on that one.
Yeah.
But no, that didn't work for me. Trying like in the way I was trying harm reduction, it didn't work for me because my intention wasn't truly that. So who's to say with a different mindset? But still, that
Yeah.
didn't really work for me. Um, to be honest, for a while, I left 12 step completely for like 4 or 5 years. It wasn't really working for me. I was getting caught up in a lot of personalities. I've since come back and did the damn thing, got a sponsor, worked the steps. I've sponsored men since that thing. And kind of, just embrace the buffet style of like take what I need and leave the rest. But initially it didn't work for me, but mostly not because it didn't work. I wasn't ready and I wasn't interacting with it in a way that was going to be beneficial. So there's some things that didn't work, but the common denominator is like my intention, my commitment, my or lack of in those regards. I believe in many pathways, not just because I'm a clinician, and it's like a cute thing we say, but because it's true. Like, who's to say, who's to say that the guy that was drinking a 24 rack, who's now taking it down to a six pack a day, isn't living a better life than he was before?
Yeah.
Like, is that functional? Is that, is he able to not get a DWI? Is he now engaging with something a little more safely? Who's to say that's not what recovery looks like for him specifically? Do I think that would work for me? No, but it's not my recovery, it's his. And I'm always very mindful of that, especially working in the field. Like I'm never trying to push meetings or not push meetings. I'm never trying to push like it's funny. I was watching a video of Rick. Do you know who Rick Rubin is?
He's a music producer, right?
Correct. Yeah, and he looks like a psychotic wizard, and he looks
Oh
like he
yes.
must do a lot of LSD, and he
Yeah.
actually has only apparently ever done hallucinogenics once, and he's not a drug user or drinker at all. He's just a professional crazy person, which is delightful. But he talks about like always take advice with a grain of salt, even like clinically, because the person giving you advice is not considering you, not fully. They're kind of giving you advice like what I would do in that situation.
Yeah.
So just because this is what worked for me doesn't mean it's what's going to work for somebody else. And
Absolutely.
I've
Yeah,
really embraced that,
absolutely.
like personally and professionally.
Yeah, that's definitely like I mean, I'll just surface a little briefly talk about what we spoke about at your meeting, but like um yeah, like the multiple pathways to recovery. Like if one
Mhm.
thing didn't work for one of the let's just say one of the people that were speaking right in that group, if that specific group or if anonymous program wasn't working for them or therapy wasn't working for them, like just to keep coming
Yeah,
back, like the one guy who was saying that, he really wanted to come to that meeting. He didn't come, and it kind of reinforced that thought in his brain, like, actually, I do need to be here. I want to be here.
yeah.
So, something like that that reinforced that mindset for him. But like the reason why I asked the question to everybody, well, I'm going to ask the question to everybody is like, what didn't work for you is just to point out the fact, like you said, if one pathway didn't work, that's all right. There's a lot of
Yeah,
different pathways now. It's not, the way things used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago, where it was like, there's this one pathway, this is the only way it works. And then if you'd fail at this, you're
yeah.
done. There's multiple
Old
pathways.
school PCUs were brutal.
Yeah. I got I mean I have a friend of mine. I'm not gonna break his anonymity at all because he's not out there, but I have a friend of mine who used to be addicted to opiates like us.
Mm,
Got clean, tried the 12-step thing for a while, and he did it for a little while, and he felt like it wasn't for him. He felt like, um, he just felt like it wasn't for him. But he's been clean for well over 10 years at this point, but he still has a drink from time to time. He goes on vacation, he drinks, he might meet up with his buddies, go golfing, he drinks, and that's what works for him. Could that work for me? I don't believe so. I don't believe I could go have a drink. I mean, like you said, at this point, maybe I could and it would be fine, but it's not something that's worth the risk to me. It's like to me, I don't think that it's not worth the risk, like I said, for me. But
mm,
the everybody's path is different. So just because mine is what worked for me, we just like to talk about what's worked for us to try to help the next person. And if it
of
doesn't work
course.
for what worked for me, doesn't work for you, that's cool. Try this other person's. That's why I'm doing this. I want to put out multiple different pathways to
Yeah,
recovery. So it's like it's not just mine, it's not just yours, it's not just Aaron's, it's not just everybody else that's going to come after. I don't want people to feel discouraged if their therapist didn't work for them. If your therapist doesn't work, try another one. If that one doesn't work, try
yeah,
another one. Just keep going because you're worth the fight. Um,
absolutely. No, like 12 step didn't work for me independently. Therapy didn't work for me independently. Later, I was utilizing both simultaneously. And
yeah,
like it turned out like instead of doing one thing, maximizing my resources is what happened to work for me. And
yeah,
also just the matter of being like ready. And when I say ready, it doesn't mean like, well, it didn't work before when you're serious or ready, come back in a few years later. No, like I was behaving in a way where even though I recognized one problem, I would then kind of shift to another problem and then shift. Like I wasn't ready to do the real work to get clean and and sober and also grow as a person. And then the pain got great enough and I was ready and I found myself in and precarious situations once more. And you know, then it worked.
yeah.
It worked when I was ready and willing.
That's it.
And you know, it was a combination of things. It was a therapy. It was 12 step. It was Um, I have gained some weight recently, but it was also diet and exercise. Like I got down to like just over 200 pounds. Like I was doing all these different things simultaneously. So it's sometimes hard to pinpoint. Well, it was this session on like June 21st that did it, or it was going to this meeting in October. It was the medicine's hidden. Like
Yeah,
you're as long as you keep focusing on doing things to grow and change and make genuine effort to do it, it's kind of funny. As long as you try to grow and improve yourself, some of the other stuff will kind of follow. Like don't always fixate on like and be gentle with yourself. Like if you have a slip or recurrence, like that doesn't mean you etch a sketch everything and throw it all away, man. Like, you still learn what you learn. You were missing something. Just gotta figure it out
yeah,
and
and
reapply.
that can apply to everything in life. Like you
Yeah.
said, and not getting down on yourself because it's not a linear path up, and it's always going to be up and down and
Mm,
up and down. Like you said, you health and fitness was a thing for you for a while. You've put on some weight, but dude, you're taking like 36 freaking college courses, like classes, like credits right now. I
yeah.
think anybody would understand that. I'm not trying not to get down on myself. You're probably gonna laugh at me, but like I was down to like 183 pounds, like probably about a month ago, and now I'm up to like 190, 192 because I haven't been eating the best over the last
Hmm.
4 weeks, and I'm looking at myself and like the definition I had is slowly fading, which is pissing me off. But I'm not going to get down on myself and call myself a piece of shit because I fucking ate too many goddamn, desserts and pieces of pizza over the last 4 weeks. It's just all right. Let me just dial back in and I'll get it back. So, when you are done in a month, you can kind of focus more on getting back into it if that's what you want to and not getting down on
Hmm.
yourself. And I think that's a
Yeah.
huge thing because life is going to keep on happening. The ups and downs are going to keep on happening once, you get some sustained recovery. Um, so aside from your recovery tools, what have you done,
Hmm.
to rebuild your life and restore purpose and meaning?
No, it's interesting. Like modern man, and I don't say man to say men specifically, modern humanity is plagued with the question of why. Like technology, like even back in like medieval times and serfdom, like there was a pecking order of like this is my lot in life, this is my purpose, is to be like a farmer or to be whatever. And not that people maybe didn't have dreams or aspirations, but due to limits of technology and medicine and more draconic social caste systems, people kind of fit into these boxes. And now that we have so much freedom, we've access to so many things, it's almost had in some ways an inverse effect. Where is it like, have we discovered all these new mental illnesses, or have they been caused by the progress of, technology and science and medication? Whereas now I have the time to sit around and say, what is my purpose? And then to tell myself I'm a special, unique snowflake, and then be like, what do I do? And to be fair, I'm not saying anyone is or they aren't, but it's, I remember being plagued by why and then finding my purpose. So, what other tools? Music. Like I had always believed that I was going to be. I remember being so cocky, being like 14 years old. I went and saw Eric Clapton at what was the Pepsi Arena at the time. My father took me. We went there. We went to the back when Ticketmaster used to have physical locations. We're
Hmm.
old, but we,
Hmm.
we went there to buy tickets for something else, and they had apparently announced the day of that there was tickets for Eric Clapton. They had opened a new section on the floor, so I got floor seats. I'm in like the
Wow.
13th row on the floor seeing Eric Clapton,
Wow.
chairman of the chord, right? Amazing guitarist. And I remember telling my dad, I was like, one day I'm gonna be bigger than him, and I just like believed it.
Hmm.
Ironically enough, also still hated myself, but like had like interesting, awkward confidence in other ways, and my ability to do certain things. So I was in various bands growing up, and then I got into this again, all or nothing thinking of, well, if I can't be a Billboard charting 100 artist or something like that. If I'm not on the cover of Rolling Stone, I don't want to do it at all. Then no matter what I do, I won't make it. And I remember being very, very young, even before I discovered music or started playing it. I discovered music and not played it yet. I remember just knowing, like, I'm here as a healer. Like, I'm here to help people heal, but in a way where it was very sacrificial. Like, there's this notion in Christianity around the Middle Ages of something known as like a sin eater. And like there was even a movie with like Heath Ledger where that's what he is. Like he's like a priest that's fallen from grace. And what they do is they consume and take on, they absolve other people of their sins and kind of overload themselves. And then like they never get into heaven, but they facilitate healing and cleansing other people. And I had heard of that before the movie ever existed. I went to like Catholic school, and I was actually at one point like wanting to become a priest. It's a whole separate story. And I was like really romanticize this notion of like, oh, I am unworthy. I don't deserve things. I will sacrifice myself for others. But through the lens of like I'm healing them. So I'd always known my purpose was to be a healer. And I wasn't doing that for years and years and years and years. And also I knew I was like, I can heal people through music. And when I first, towards the end of my use, I play like 15 instruments. I stopped playing all music completely and almost stopped listening to music completely as well. I kind of let this passion die. And then it wasn't until some years in recovery that I rediscovered it. And rediscovering music, the genuine therapeutic and healing tool it is, I could cite a bunch of numbers about like, because I had to, because I wrote a paper on it. And I also did when they let me buy for what I do for work, they let me buy a bunch of drums. I do like a full on, I don't call it music therapy because I don't bill for it, but I do effectively like an interactive music therapy group, drumming group, every week at the clinic, which is like amazing. Um, no, like really embracing that, like the healing properties of music and sound frequencies and different things like that, and how it produces oxytocin, which is like connection, and how it regulates the vagus nerve, which regulates your fight and flight, the vibrations and the resonance, all this stuff. Like truly rediscovering music and like really buying into it is what has been like one of the greatest tools, both in like my own personal journey and discovery, or of discovery rather, in my recovery, and maintaining and sustaining that recovery, as well as then something that I literally get to pay forward and like help other people heal. Like I always knew I was meant to be a healer. I was just burning myself to a cinder to make someone smile. I was toxic and codependent in certain ways. And now, like the professional boundaries I have now, the professional skills I have now, utilizing all these tools and my experience without people knowing that I'm in recovery. I don't like openly discuss it, obviously, in the clinical setting. Like I am a healer. That's what I was always meant to be. But finding my purpose, and it wasn't even a matter of finding it. I knew at like a weirdly young age. Like I remember being like 9 and 10 years old. My uncle, who was like 30 something, would come and talk to me about his relationship. And like I'd give him weird relationship. I'm like 9. What do I know? And like, and also it's funny, like I'm bald now, ironically, but for many years I had long flowing hair. But I was like a little weird chunky bald Buddha kid. Like so I flew down to New York City, excuse me, New York City and then to North Carolina by myself when I was like 13, go visit my uncle. And like I'm just in an airport and like strangers are telling me about like when their parent had molested. Like my entire life, people just divulge information to me. Like there's something about my personality. There's something about, and I, at a very young age, I just knew I was like, oh, I'm meant to like help absolve people, like
Hmm.
to help take what they, like I'm human Brita, but I had to learn how to change and drain the filter.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I wasn't doing. Human Brita.
Wow, that's awesome. I can completely identify with the music aspect of it. I mean, I felt the same
Yeah.
way when I was 13 or 14. Like I'm going to be a rock star. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to be playing in front of all these people. The first time I went to see 311 play at Jones Beach on Long Island, I was like, this is what I am meant to do. This is what I am going to do. So for like the
Amber, what's
next,
the color of your energy?
yeah, stay positive and love your life, baby. Um, right
Okay,
here.
311 school. Yep. Well, there it is. Yes.
Um, so yeah, but so I played music every day for hours, nonstop as a
Yeah.
kid in different bands and playing all over the place. So, but I remember, like for a while, I lost the passion for music in
Mm,
my life, and that was in that time period where I wasn't, I was clean, but I wasn't doing anything else. But I hadn't really worked on myself, and I was a young father, and I really hated, who I was at that point, and
mm,
just not feeling worthy to even have the family I had because of my past and whatnot. And for years, I didn't pick up my guitar for years. I didn't pick up my bass for years, and I really like even stopped listening to music for quite a long time. Like, but that was music has been one of the huge things for me in recovery also.
mhm,
When I got into recovery 5 years ago, I started picking up my guitar and playing a lot more often, writing music again, writing songs again, playing. Anytime I get a free minute, even if it's only for 5 minutes, I'll pick my guitar up and just strum a few riffs or play a song. Or it really is. There's something special about just sitting down and playing music and feeling the rhythm and
mhm.
creating something that you wrote or playing something for someone else. It's something really special that I'm really has been a huge part of my recovery also.
Absolutely. And that's the stuff we're doing and like this group. Like we're writing a song together right now. And like we figured out what the verse is gonna be, we figured out what the chorus is gonna be, and then we're coming up with the melody. And you don't have to you can talk the words, but you gotta participate. That's a I'm just
Yeah,
saying if you don't feel comfortable, and talk the words. And then people are like, oh, well, y'all sing this part, then you'll sing that part. And we might be overcomplicating it because there's a bunch of people that are not trained musicians, but like, whatever, like
yeah,
we're gonna do it. It's gonna sound horrible and we're gonna laugh and have fun. And part
absolutely.
of it's also just being able to like, they don't even, again, the medicine is hidden, right? But like, they're having fun, they're creating, we're laughing like the
Yeah,
whole time. And like, you know, how many outpatient clinics do you know that they have like a music group where you like get to laugh for 2 hours?
I
Like
never heard
there's
of that.
there's
That's
not a
awesome.
ton. So
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure they exist. That's not like I'm reinventing the wheel. Like there's very few people do anything like that. But it's and having the supportive facility that believes in me and my clinical skill set and my vision of what I want to do is like a huge thing.
yeah,
Because even with like even with the hyper confidence and sometimes overconfidence I have, part of that is because of the imposter syndrome that like I live with on a daily basis. Like when they said yes, I could do the group, I was like, I don't know enough about music. And then I'm like, and then it's like, you freak out for like 10 minutes in your head, and then you're like, hey, asshole, like you got accepted to Berkeley School of Music, you got accepted to Juilliard, you didn't go to either, but like you like I haven't read sheet music quite some time, but like, dude, you play 15 instruments, like you'll figure it out, man. Even if you're
Yeah.
just goofing your way through, like you'll figure it out. You're not gonna
Yeah.
hurt anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, all right, yeah, cool. And even music, and part of the reason I think I let it lie dormant is there was such a connection, specifically with hallucinogenics in music for so long that I think, and then I love stoner doom metal, rock, and all that. And that is perfectly made for like being in a lean when you're on opiates.
Yeah.
So like I think part of me was like terrified that like if I listened to it, then I would want to do drugs. And then I ended up at one point I ended up going to a show with people in recovery that also love stoner doom metal. And the first note, I felt the resonance of the music. I felt it in my chest and in my heart. And I was like, oh, I was wrong. And I was like,
Yeah.
I was crying. I was like, I can't believe I get to have this again.
Yeah.
And
No, that's awesome, man.
and who knows, maybe I wasn't ready for it before. And it happened had to happen that way, or maybe I was overthinking it.
No, I
I've
don't
done
think
that a
there's
fair
anything
amount of
wrong with it. I
times.
mean, it's one of those things where like uh it's I don't think it's a bad thing to be overly careful in your first
Hmm,
several years. Like I
sure.
I'm a Knicks fan and I was my
Yep.
big thing was daily fantasy sports when I was gambling.
Oh yeah.
So I did not um when I stopped placing bets, I basically cut sports out of my life for years. It was probably 2 or 3 years before the first time I even watched a game, and that was just the Super Bowl. And it wasn't until this past year where I even started watching some basketball games, and I ended up taking my son to a Knicks game
Yeah.
back in April, which was a good year to become a Knicks fan again or to get back into it.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't be too careful in your early recovery. So if you felt like that was something that could have, triggered something in your brain, it's not a bad thing to lay that foundation and then reintroduce something that even if you feel like it could be a trigger, it's good to just shy away from it for a little bit. So that leads us
No.
into our last question I got for you. What words of encouragement or suggestions do you have for someone just entering recovery or maybe currently struggling?
So kind of a continuation of that, and then I'll answer in 10 parts. No, no, like trial and error. No one does any of this shit perfectly. You're gonna you're gonna think something's a good idea. You're gonna think your intentions were pure, and then you're gonna show up at her house or pick up a phone call or go somewhere, or I don't know how I ended up off the bus stop one stop early. Like these things are gonna happen. Intentions and motives, subconscious. When you become, I'm a big proponent of self-awareness equates to everything, recovery. The moment you become self-aware that you maybe started to skew, like in the chain of reaction, in the chain and cycle of addiction, we can choose to break the chain at any point in time. Just because you find yourself in a bad spot or situation doesn't mean you have to go all the way, right? And and if you do, you're not a piece of shit. You're not a fuck up. You're not worthless. You're someone who has spent a lot of time reinforcing a specific behavior, and I could go into some of the boring brain science behind it, but I won't. This isn't a group or a session of mine. But like, there's reasons. There's like science as to why we do some of these things. Like, you're not a bad person. You're not a monster. Uh, you're a person who found a coping skill or mechanism that at one time was awesome because no one uses because it sucks, right? It helped in the moment, and I'm a big proponent of the survival skills we learn as children serve to be our shackles in adulthood.
Yeah.
So if what I learned to do as a child was to escape, and then I spent my adolescence perfecting and finding better ways to escape, translate that to adulthood, and now I'm shooting dope and doing different things like that, that's not sustainable. When we're kids, we don't have a fully functioned prefrontal cortex. We can't fully engage in like emotional and deductive reasoning in that way. Our decision making is skewed. We're literally wired to be more geared towards sensation. And, you know, it's funny, all the kids, they're doing looks maxing now. Like it's pleasure maxing, right?
Yeah.
We're pleasure maxing out there. And I say all that to say like it's not that you're not a special unique snowflake, but like your pain, what you've done to help and cope with your pain. I mean, there's a reason why we even have treatment centers. My guy, you're not the only one. And I don't say that to be demeaning. I say that for identification, like to normalize. Like you could have 5 years clean, and on the best day, something's gonna sound nice.
Yeah.
You know, the right convergence of like events, memory, memory and boredom are the two largest activating circumstances there are. You know, think about it. People are only chemically dependent for so long. And then so what's the activator then? Our memories, good ones and bad ones, you know. And the notion of home, like so Ram Dass, Baba Ram Dass was this hip guy. He was influential in like the counterculture movement in the 60s. And when he was a young man was proponent of like hallucinogens and stuff like that for mind expansion. He wrote some several books like Be Here Now and things like that. But he has a bunch of really interesting and profound quotes. And one of his quotes is, "We're all walking each other home." And you know, when we use drugs, when we seek euphoria, it's like we get, the way he conceptualizes it is like, yeah, you can take a drug and seek euphoria, and then that allows you to spend 2 hours with God, but then, it's gone, and then there's the rebound effect, and then there's the guilt and shame. The addict's loop continues, right?
Hmm.
Why not seek to become, you know, Christ-like or God-like? Why not seek to become, and the way I conceptualize it is like self-fulfilling and self-validating, and we're all kind of seeking home. Like I love being up on a stage. You sound like you love being on a stage, or at least did at one time.
Hmm.
That feels like when I'm up there playing music and connecting with people, I feel, I get into a flow state. It's spiritual, it's
Yeah.
godly, it's whatever term you want to use. Someone else would have a panic attack at the thought.
Yeah.
So the thing is, home looks different for you, for me, for Joe Schmo down the block. But home, when you think of home, what is it? It's warmth, it's security, it's safety, it's non-judgment. You kind of conceptualize like a recliner, like, ah, leaning back and being at peace and having a sense of fulfillment and oneness. And, we're all just walking each other home. Be patient with yourself, be patient with other people. What looks like home for you looks different than someone that you know or even someone you love. And just trying to be gentle with yourself and them because we're not perfect people. And usually, if someone's upset, it has almost nothing to do, depending on the circumstance, with like me or you. People are going through stuff. We don't have to personalize anything, you know, and we're all just walking each other home, I suppose, is my final bit of advice.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I couldn't say
Yeah.
it any better. I mean, yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, what works for one may not work for the next. And we're just here to kind of share our stories and share what's worked for us. And hopefully we can help the next person coming in. But if, what we're putting down is not something that, they're picking up, there's a lot of us out there who've recovered in different ways from different walks of life. And yeah, you're right. I mean, just the thought of being up on stage is just, I love it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
just
great.
some people who, yeah, will have a freaking panic attack, which is just like some people, like I loved going to therapy and I loved diving into the why behind everything
Yeah.
because it really helped me learn about myself and really recognize behaviors going forward. But then there's some people I know who've been 30 years clean or 30 years bet free in GA who are like, I don't know why I bet and I don't care. And this is how I stay bet free. This is how I stay clean. I'm like, okay, that works for you.
That works for you. Yeah.
Doesn't work for me, but that's okay. Whatever gets you to build a better life and be a better
Hmm.
person to the people around you and yourself, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. And like, I say this, but with like a caveat, like find your purpose, but also sometimes we get lost and on what that purpose is. Sometimes the journey is the purpose. Like learn to fall in love with the process
Yeah.
because everything's a process. And guess what? Processes fucking suck. But like we live in
Yeah.
an age of immediacy. We're speaking on a computer. I have a computer next to me in my pocket. Like
Yeah.
I can look up 15th century French art if I want, have results in 0.0023 seconds
Yeah.
if I want to look that up. We live in an age of immediacy. Like this is a process. It's a
Yeah.
journey. Like learn to love the process. I mean, I happen to be a large man and my father was actually a professional chef, but you know, I think about cooking, like the process of cooking. Like I learned how to love the process, how to cut the vegetables a certain way, how to skewer it just right, how to saute, like the whole process. And in the end, even though there's all these individual processes that are happening, at the end you bring it together and it's like, a Michelin star quality meal. But you don't get there on day one. You
Yeah.
don't just like you're not just born and you're like with a ladle in your hand and you know how to
Yeah.
make like bomb
Exactly.
ass soup. Like
That's it.
there's levels to this shit. And for every level another devil. That sometimes the reward for hard work, unfortunately, is more hard work.
Yeah.
Life has a funny way of giving us opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
We may not meet all of them, and that's okay. It's like learning how to be gentle with yourself and trying to fall in love with the process. Because
Yeah.
it's funny, you keep trying to do the next right thing without focusing too much on the results, and things just kind of work out.
Yeah. Yeah. They start to fall into place.
Not always how I imagine they will,
Yeah.
but usually what's best for me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for doing this, Chris. I really appreciate
No,
it.
man, anytime. It was a
Yeah.
blast.
This was great. And thank you everyone who stuck through listening to this podcast with Chris. I really appreciate anybody who's you know, listening to this podcast, trying to find some good resources. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you all picked up some of the great knowledge that Chris was putting down for us. So thanks everybody who was listening, and be good to yourselves and each other. Bye.